A quiet BBC studio. No audience, no laughter to soften the edges. Just two women on a curved sofa under cold, perfect lights. One trained to control the story. The other trained to dismantle it. Meghan Markle arrived expecting a carefully framed conversation. Victoria Derbyshire arrived with notes, timelines, and one simple rule. If the answer doesn't match the record, she will ask again. And tonight, for the first time in a long time, Meghan would realize something too late. On Newsnight, there's nowhere to hide. The studio looked calmer than the headlines ever did. A crescent-shaped gray sofa wrapped around a glossy circular table that glowed faintly from underneath. Magenta light bleeding into the polished surface like a quiet warning. Two blue mugs sat untouched, placed with the kind of symmetry that only happens when producers are trying to make tension look like balance. Behind them, enormous screens pulsed with abstract blues and purples. In the center, the word Newsnight floated like a verdict. No audience. No applause sign. No room to win the room. Only microphones, cameras, and the truth, whatever shape it decided to take tonight. Meghan sat on the left curve of the sofa. Her posture was immaculate, shoulders back, chin level, the controlled poise of someone who had practiced being photographed since before the doors opened. She wore a fitted cream-toned top with a clean neckline and a deep blue skirt that fell elegantly to her knees. Tall black boots grounded the look, polished enough to suggest she thought about every angle, including the one where she stood up and left. Victoria Derbyshire sat opposite on the right curve, dressed in a crisp white dress with short sleeves, a pen resting between her fingers like a calm extension of her hand. A small stack of notes sat beside her. Not dramatic, not messy, just prepared. The BBC floor manager's voice was soft but decisive. "We're rolling in 5. Meghan's eyes flicked briefly toward a camera. A half-smile appeared. Practiced, presentable, distant. Victoria didn't look at the camera at all. She looked at Meghan. 4. Meghan adjusted her hands on her lap, fingers interlaced, stillness as strategy. 3. Victoria's expression held a polite warmth that didn't reach the part of her eyes that asked questions for a living. 2. Meghan inhaled slow and measured. 1. A red light blinked on. Victoria's voice entered the silence with the exact tone audiences trusted, clear, calm, unhurried. "Good evening. I'm Victoria Derbyshire. Tonight on Newsnight, an extended interview with Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, on public scrutiny, personal narratives, and the power of media in shaping lives." Meghan nodded once as if accepting the premise. Victoria turned slightly toward her, still calm. "Meghan, thank you for joining us." "Thank you for having me," Meghan replied, her voice smooth. Not overly friendly, not hostile, controlled. Victoria gave a small smile. "There's no studio audience tonight. No distractions, just a conversation." Meghan's eyes held hers. "That's good. Conversations are where truth actually lives when they're allowed to." The line landed softly, but it carried a blade in the velvet. Victoria didn't flinch. "Let's start with something simple. You've spoken often about feeling misrepresented. If you could correct one misconception the public has about you, just one, what would it be?" The question was open, generous, even a softball designed to invite reflection. Meghan's smile tightened at the edges. "That I'm difficult," she said almost immediately. "It's a label people use when a woman doesn't accept the version of herself others prefer." Victoria nodded slowly, acknowledging without endorsing. "And why do you think that label stuck?" Meghan's gaze sharpened, still polite, but suddenly awake. "Because it was useful," she said. "To the tabloids, to the institution, to anyone who benefited from making me smaller." Victoria kept her voice steady. "When you say the institution, you mean the royal household." "I mean a system," Meghan replied, careful but firm. "A machine designed to protect itself. And yes, that includes the royal household." Victoria let a beat of silence pass. Enough time for the viewers at home to feel the weight of it. Then she leaned in slightly, almost conversational. "On Newsnight, we have to be precise. When you say machine, are you talking about individuals or structures? Because those are different claims." Meghan's smile returned. "Cooler now. I'm talking about the lived experience," she said. "And frankly, Victoria, the obsession with precision can be a way of avoiding the point. The first real spark. Not an explosion, just the faint sound of a match." Victoria's expression stayed neutral, but her pen stopped moving. "Sometimes precision is how we keep fairness," she replied. "It's also how we keep accountability." Meghan's eyes narrowed just slightly. Accountability goes both ways. Victoria accepted that without argument. It does. Which is why I want to ask about something you've said repeatedly. Being silenced. Meghan's posture remained perfect, but her shoulders tightened like a silent door closing. Victoria continued, her tone still polite. You've described feeling silenced while also speaking in major interviews, producing content, issuing public statements, and running initiatives. People watching might wonder, how do those two realities fit together? Meghan blinked once slowly, then she smiled again, but this time it looked less like gratitude and more like restraint. Because you can speak, she said, and still be silenced. Victoria nodded. Explain what you mean. Meghan leaned forward slightly, hands still composed, refusing to give the cameras any messy movement to feed on. When you speak and people decide they won't hear you, when they cut the context, distort the intention, question your sanity, reduce you to a headline, she paused, letting the words hang. That's a form of silencing. Victoria held her gaze. And you believe that's what happened to you. I don't believe it, Meghan corrected. I lived it. There it was. The first clipped edge in her voice, the beginning of impatience. Victoria didn't react emotionally. She reacted structurally, like an interviewer building a bridge plank by plank. Okay, she said. Let's take one example. Your relationship with the British press. Meghan's eyes brightened with alertness, as if she'd been waiting for this. Victoria continued. You've described certain coverage as cruel and relentless. At the same time, critics say you and Harry have pursued visibility in ways that keep the cycle alive. Interviews, projects, public statements. How do you respond to the claim that visibility has sometimes been a choice? Meghan's smile faded completely. That claim, she said, is the kind of false equivalence that keeps abuse polite. Victoria didn't blink. You're calling scrutiny abuse. I'm calling targeted harassment what it is, Meghan replied, voice sharper now. And I'm calling the framing of you chose this what it is, a way of blaming people for being harmed. A pause. Victoria set the pen down carefully, like she didn't want even the sound of plastic to break the moment. Meghan, she said, still calm. I want to be careful here, but we also have a responsibility to challenge narratives when there are contradictions. Meghan's chin lifted. Contradictions, she repeated, tasting the word. Or complexities. Victoria's answer came without a blink. Sometimes both. But tonight we'll test which one applies. Meghan stared at her for a long beat, the studio suddenly feeling colder despite the glowing table. Then she gave a small nod, like she'd accepted a duel. All right, she said softly. Test it. Victoria returned the nod, equally controlled. Let's talk about timelines, she said. The word timelines didn't sound aggressive, but it hit Meghan like a warning bell. Her hands tightened together in her lap, still neat, but no longer relaxed. Victoria glanced down at her notes for the first time, then back up. In previous public statements, you've described the point when you realized you were unsafe mentally and emotionally. You've also described when you asked for help. I want to walk through that sequence carefully, because different versions have been presented over time. Meghan's eyes sharpened. Her voice stayed low. Different versions, she said, or different moments being selectively quoted? Victoria didn't rise to it. She kept her tone level. That's exactly what we're going to find out. A silence stretched thin and electric. The camera held both women in the same frame. Two immaculate figures on a gray sofa, surrounded by bright screens and a glowing table, as if the set itself was designed to look modern while something ancient, power, reputation, survival, played out in real time. Meghan's smile returned for a split second. Not warmth. Armor. Victoria's expression remained steady. Not cruel, not sympathetic, just committed. Let's begin, Victoria said. And Meghan realized too late that this wasn't an interview where she could redirect with emotion. This was New Sight, and New Sight didn't follow feelings. It followed the record. The lights didn't change between segments. That was the thing about New Sight. No dramatic reset. No musical sting to soften what came next. Just the same cool studio, the same glowing table, the same two women. Now fully aware that the polite phase was over. Victoria didn't rush. She never rushed. She let the silence do what it always did. Make people uncomfortable enough to fill it. Meghan noticed. Her posture stayed elegant, but there was a new rigidity to it, like a porcelain figure that could crack if handled the wrong way. Her eyes tracked Victoria closely now, no longer glancing toward the cameras. Victoria lifted her notes again. Let's talk about timing, she said calmly. Because timing matters when we're trying to understand cause and effect. Meghan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. You've said that you began struggling significantly during your pregnancy, Victoria continued. You've also said you reached out for help and were turned away. Can you tell us clearly when that request happened? Meghan exhaled through her nose, controlled but audible. It happened when I realized I was drowning, she said. When I couldn't see a way forward without intervention. Victoria nodded. And who did you reach out to? Meghan hesitated. Not long, just enough. People within the system, she said. People who were supposed to protect me. Victoria's voice remained even. Names matter here. Meghan's eyes flashed. No, she said. They don't. Not when the system itself is the problem. Victoria didn't push immediately. She let that answer sit, then leaned forward slightly. Here's why I'm asking, she said. Because contemporaneous accounts from palace staff suggest a different sequence of events. They say concerns were raised earlier, and that discussions did take place. Meghan's head tilted, her expression sharpening into something colder. Palace staff, she repeated. Anonymous sources. Victoria met her gaze. Some of them are on record. A flicker. Not panic, but irritation. On record according to whom? Meghan asked. Institutions that have every incentive to rewrite history. Victoria didn't take the bait. She took the facts. According to internal communications reviewed during subsequent inquiries, she said. I'm not assigning blame. I'm trying to establish clarity. Meghan leaned back slightly, crossing her legs with deliberate composure. Clarity, she said. Or control. Victoria's reply was immediate. Accuracy? The word landed hard. Meghan's lips pressed together. For the first time since the interview began, she didn't answer right away. Victoria continued, voice still calm. You've spoken powerfully about mental health. Many people listening tonight have had similar experiences. What they often ask is not whether pain was real, but whether all the facts were presented. Meghan's voice, when it came, was sharper. I don't owe the public a forensic breakdown of my trauma. Victoria nodded once. No one is asking for that. But when trauma is used to support public claims that affect institutions, reputations, and policy, scrutiny is inevitable. Meghan's eyes hardened. That's a very comfortable position for someone who's never lived inside that pressure cooker. Victoria didn't rise to the personal remark. She rarely did. You're right, she said. I haven't. That's why I rely on documentation. The air in the studio felt heavier now. Even the screens behind them seemed harsher, the colors colder. Victoria flipped a page. I want to move to another point, she said. You've said repeatedly that you and Prince Harry were financially cut off without warning. Can you clarify when that happened? Meghan's answer came quickly this time. When we stepped back. When we chose independence. Victoria nodded. In early 2020? Yes. And yet financial disclosures show continued support for a period after that, Victoria said gently. Security arrangements, transitional funding. Meghan's eyes narrowed. You're parsing generosity, she said. As if support under duress is the same as support with dignity. Victoria held her ground. I'm parsing timelines. The word again. Timelines. Meghan's fingers flexed once in her lap before settling again. You keep saying timelines, she said. But life isn't a spreadsheet. No, Victoria replied. But accountability often is. That landed. Meghan let out a short, humorless laugh. This is starting to feel less like an interview, she said, and more like a cross-examination. Victoria didn't deny it outright. It's a serious program, she said, and serious claims deserve serious questions. Meghan's tone cooled. I agreed to speak, not to be interrogated. Victoria's voice softened slightly. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. A pause. Meghan looked away for the first time, her gaze drifting toward the glowing table. The blue mug sat untouched between them, props in a conversation that had long stopped being ceremonial. When she looked back up, her voice was controlled but edged. You're framing my life as a series of inconsistencies, she said. When what it really is, a human experience, doesn't fit neatly into your boxes. Victoria nodded slowly. Human experiences still have sequences. Meghan leaned forward now, breaking her own stillness rule. And sequences can be weaponized, she said. Especially against women. Victoria didn't interrupt. They ask you to be precise, Meghan continued, her voice gaining force. And then they punish you for every word. Victoria waited until the sentence fully ended. Precision, she said, is not punishment. It's protection from exaggeration, from misunderstanding, from myth. Meghan's eyes flashed. Myth, she repeated. You think my life is a myth? Victoria met her stare evenly. I think parts of the public narrative are contested, she said. And tonight we're examining that. The tension was no longer subtle. This wasn't warmth versus hostility anymore. It was control versus structure. Meghan straightened, reclaiming composure like armor snapping back into place. Then let's examine something else, she said coolly. Why women like me are always expected to prove our pain while institutions are given the benefit of doubt. Victoria nodded, acknowledging the point without conceding. That's a fair question, she said. But it doesn't eliminate the need to verify claims. Meghan shook her head once. You're doing exactly what I'm talking about, she said. You're asking me to perform credibility while others remain faceless. Victoria didn't raise her voice. She never did. Institutions don't cry on camera, she said. People do. That's why scrutiny has to be even. Silence. Not awkward. Not explosive. Just dense. Meghan stared at Victoria, measuring her. Victoria stared back. Not challenging, not sympathetic, just present. Finally, Meghan spoke slower now. I came here to speak honestly, she said. But honesty doesn't survive when it's constantly dissected. Victoria replied gently. Honesty is strongest when it does. Meghan's lips pressed together. Her breathing was shallow now, controlled, but faster than before. The realization was settling in. This wasn't a platform she could steer with emotion alone. This wasn't a show that rewarded vulnerability without verification. And for the first time that evening, Meghan looked tired. Victoria glanced briefly toward the camera, then back to Meghan. We're going to take a short pause, she said. When we come back, I want to talk about responsibility, what it means when public figures speak, and what happens when trust fractures. Meghan didn't answer. She just nodded once. But the nod wasn't agreement. It was restraint, and everyone watching could feel it. The breaking point wasn't behind them anymore. It was ahead. There was no music when they returned. Just the soft hum of the studio, the glow of the new site screens, and two women who now understood exactly what this conversation had become. Victoria didn't smile when the camera light came back on. She didn't need to. Before the break, she said evenly, we were talking about responsibility, specifically the responsibility that comes with public testimony. Meghan's posture was perfect. Too perfect. Back straight, hands folded, chin lifted. I'm very aware of responsibility, Meghan replied. I live with it every day. Victoria inclined her head slightly. Then let's talk about consequences. The word landed differently than the others had. Your interviews, Victoria continued, have had measurable effects. Public trust in institutions, individual reputations, diplomatic relationships. Do you believe you carry responsibility for those outcomes? Meghan didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was smooth but defensive. I believe the truth has consequences, she said. If institutions fall apart under scrutiny, that's not my doing. Victoria nodded. And if the scrutiny is based on incomplete or evolving accounts? Meghan's eyes sharpened. Are you suggesting I lied? Victoria didn't flinch. I'm suggesting that some statements have changed over time. That's called growth, Meghan snapped. Or are people not allowed to reflect anymore? Victoria held steady. Reflection usually brings clarity. In some cases, it's created confusion. Meghan exhaled sharply. You're framing nuance as inconsistency, she said. That's unfair. Victoria answered calmly. Viewers decide what's fair. My role is to give them context. Meghan leaned forward now, unable or unwilling to maintain the stillness. And who gives me context, she asked. Who corrects the record when my words are pulled apart and repackaged for skepticism? Victoria paused, then spoke carefully. That's precisely why precision matters. Meghan laughed. Short. Brittle. You keep coming back to that word, she said. Precision, as if trauma arrives with timestamps. Victoria replied quietly. But public claims do. The silence that followed wasn't just tension. It was realization. Meghan's voice lowered. This feels adversarial. Victoria nodded. Because the stakes are high. I'm not on trial, Meghan said. No, Victoria agreed. But narratives are. Meghan's eyes flashed. You're reducing my lived experience to a debate. Victoria shook her head slightly. I'm separating experience from assertion. Meghan sat back, crossing her arms now, defensive closed. This is exactly why people stop speaking, she said. Because the moment they do, they're dissected. Victoria answered gently. People stop trusting when questions aren't allowed. That one cut deeper. Meghan stared at her, incredulous. So what? You think I shouldn't have spoken at all? Victoria chose her words carefully. I think speaking carries responsibility to accuracy, even when it's uncomfortable. Meghan's composure began to crack. Not explosively, but visibly. You're asking for perfection, she said. From a human being. Victoria replied. I'm asking for consistency. Meghan shook her head, frustrated. Now you want a clean story, she said. But real life isn't clean. Victoria met her gaze. Then don't present it as definitive. The studio felt colder. Meghan's voice sharpened. So now I'm being accused of definitiveness. Victoria stayed calm. You've spoken in absolutes before. Meghan raised her eyebrows. Examples? Victoria didn't hesitate. You said you had no support. Later, you acknowledged some assistance. You said you were cut off completely. Financial records show transitional funding. Meghan interrupted, her tone rising. You're cherry-picking language. I'm quoting it, Victoria replied. The restraint Meghan had held on to finally slipped. You're doing exactly what the tabloids do, she said sharply. You dress skepticism up as neutrality. Victoria's voice remained level, but firmer now. No, I'm doing journalism. Meghan leaned forward again. This is not journalism, she said. This is entrapment. Victoria looked directly at her. Enter requires deception, she said. I've been clear about every question. Meghan's breathing quickened. The polish was still there, but the patience was gone. You invited me here, she said. You promised a fair conversation. And you've had one, Victoria replied. Fair doesn't mean unchallenged. Meghan scoffed. This is exactly why I don't do interviews like this anymore. Victoria's response was immediate and quiet. Then why did you agree to this one? That was the moment Meghan froze. The question hung between them, heavy and unavoidable. I agreed, Meghan said slowly, because I believed the BBC would offer integrity. Victoria nodded. And integrity includes asking what others won't. Meghan shook her head, eyes bright with restrained anger. No, she said. Integrity includes knowing when a line has been crossed. Victoria didn't back down. And who decides where that line is? She asked. The interviewer or the interview? Meghan stared at her. For someone who talks about power structures, she said. You seem very comfortable exercising one. Victoria replied calmly. Only the one I'm accountable for. Meghan's voice rose slightly. You're not listening to me. Victoria answered softly. I am. I'm also listening to the record. That did it. Meghan uncrossed her arms abruptly, her composure visibly slipping. You came into this with an agenda, she said. You wanted to dismantle me. Victoria's expression changed. Not defensive, but resolute. No, she said. I came in with questions. And you won't stop until you get the answer you want, Meghan shot back. Victoria shook her head. Until the answers align. Meghan let out a sharp breath. This is hostile. Victoria's reply was measured. This is rigorous. Meghan stood halfway, then fully. I'm done being analyzed, she said. This isn't constructive. Victoria didn't raise her voice. We still have time, she said. And there are important issues left to discuss. Meghan shook her head. No, she said. There aren't. The room felt stunned. Meghan straightened, smoothing her skirt, reclaiming dignity through motion. You can continue this without me, she said coolly. I refuse to participate in a conversation that's designed to undermine. Victoria remained seated. Leaving won't resolve the questions, she said quietly. Meghan paused, turning back. Neither will stay, she replied. She stepped away from the sofa. The cameras didn't cut. Victoria watched her go. Not triumphantly. Not angrily. Just steadily. As Meghan disappeared off set, Victoria turned to the camera, her voice calm but weighted. We invited the Duchess to speak. We asked questions. She chose not to continue. A pause. We'll let viewers decide what that means. The studio lights remained unchanged, but the air had shifted completely. The studio didn't rush to fill the silence. There was no dramatic music, no cutaway, no hurried apology from production. Just Victoria Derbyshire seated alone beneath the Newsnight lights, the empty sofa beside her saying more than any caption ever could. She waited a beat longer than television etiquette usually allows. Then she spoke. We invited Meghan Markle on to Newsnight for a conversation about accountability, public narrative, and responsibility, Victoria said calmly. That conversation ended sooner than expected. She didn't smile. She didn't justify. And that, she continued, is also part of the story. The camera held on her. Steady, unflinching. Viewers often ask why interviews like this feel uncomfortable, Victoria said. It's because they're not performances. They're examinations. She paused. Questions don't accuse. They reveal. The director didn't cut away. Victoria folded her notes slowly, deliberately. We'll continue to ask them. The red light blinked off. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere was entirely different. Meghan stood in the corridor just outside the studio doors, heels planted, arms crossed tightly across her chest. A producer hovered nearby, uncertain whether to speak. This was not what I agreed to, Meghan said sharply, her voice low but edged. They ambushed me. The producer chose their words carefully. The questions were within the scope we discussed. Meghan turned, eyes flashing. No, she said. The tone was. She exhaled, steadying herself. I won't be part of something that turns lived experience into a courtroom. No one argued. They didn't need to. Meghan gathered her coat and walked past the Newsnight logo without another glance. Her reflection briefly catching in the glass. Composed again. Guarded. Controlled. Outside, the night air was cold and quiet. Within minutes, the reaction began. Clips spread. First among journalists, then analysts, then the public. Not the shouting. Not the walkout. The questions. Social media split cleanly down the middle. Some called the interview brutal. Others called it necessary. But one phrase repeated again and again. She wasn't attacked. She was challenged. By morning, headlines avoided sensationalism, but the subtext was unmistakable. Markle leaves Newsnight interview mid-discussion. BBC stands by editorial standards after abrupt exit. Former correspondents weighed in. Media ethicists debated tone versus duty. Viewers replayed the final exchange, searching for the exact moment the conversation turned irreversible. There wasn't one. That was the point. Back at the BBC, Victoria Derbyshire returned to her desk the next day without comment. When asked whether she regretted the approach, she answered simply, no. When asked if she would invite Meghan back, she paused. Any guest willing to engage fully is welcome. That was all. Some interviews end with applause. Some end with headlines. And some end with silence. The kind that stays with you. If you enjoy intense, no-nonsense interviews and moments where the truth gets uncomfortable, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next.